Well, hi and welcome to Coffee with Phil. Welcome to this podcast where we drink coffee. And in this series, this limited series, I'm speaking about transition, about the journey from there to over there, from where you are to where God is leading you. In this series of 8 episodes, we're going to talk about transition, sensing the new thing, seeing the new thing, how to manage fear, definitely want to stop opening closed doors, and the art of waiting well. Join me on this journey as we drink coffee and talk about transition. Good afternoon, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to Coffee with Phil, and I'm drinking coffee. How about you? A little bit of a strong aftertaste to my coffee this afternoon. It's sitting on my tongue, and I'm just wondering why that is. Yeah, not sure. Maybe the beans are a little underdone, but I'll work on that. Don't you worry, you can be sure of it. Speaking of coffee, I want to tell you a little bit about my coffee roaster. So I have a small batch roaster. It roasts only 90 grams at a time. And whilst I could extend that slightly, I'm more than happy with that. Because if I have to do 2 or 3 batches in a row to get a week's worth, it's pretty much push play, so no stress. And it takes about 8 minutes to roast and about 3 minutes to cool the beans down to about 36 degrees from roasting temperature of 210. So, but anyway, the other day I was geeking out watching a video of someone geeking out about the settings in the roaster that you can access to manage the fan speed, which has a significant effect on the air circulation, which affects how fast your beans increase in temperature and also how quickly they cool. And I was geeking out at it, but I was really not too aware of what they were doing because it's way above my pay grade. You know, like what I love about my coffee roaster is I put the beans in, I press play, and I get the product at the end of it. I thought I was going to geek out. I thought I was going to use the software to manage roast profiles and get really into it. But it's just not the case. I'm just not that technical. I like the coffee and I'm happy with the process I've got. But it leads me to apologize also with regards to some other technical blunders, because the most recent episode of Coffee with Phil 102, I had some major dramas. We published the episode and all of a sudden I'm sitting in my office one afternoon doing something else, and I get a text from a listener, and he's saying, "Hey, bro, have you heard the podcast that sounds like you're living in an echo room?" And I'm like, "Oh, no." And I text him back saying, "Thanks for the feedback. I'll jump on it soon." And he's like, "It's really hard to listen to." And what had happened was I just pushed the wrong buttons, and we'd listened to it. I'd listened to it through. I checked it. The admin team that support the publishing of the podcast, they'd listened to it and sorted out the show notes and all the links and everything that you need, and somehow got missed. Anyway, so I jumped back into the software that I use to post-produce the digital episode. And I've got this clown picture of me pulling levers and pushing buttons and steam coming out my head because I just couldn't fully remedy the problem. And I managed to isolate the majority of the podcast and get it fixed. But I think I'd pushed too many buttons and pulled too many levers in the settings for the introduction to that podcast. And oh my gosh, what just a train wreck. Anyway, so apologies to those of you that had to endure it, because if you can get past the first 3 minutes of that echo, the actual content is brilliant. Obviously, reviewing it, I had a chance to check it, and it's a really, really good episode because we are in this series called Transition. So I really felt like this was the year to launch into doing a bunch of different topics, and I'm going to focus on maybe 4 or 5 or 6 different topics this year. And the first one is transition, and I've mapped out 8 episodes that I want to talk to you about with regards to transition. And last episode 102, like I said, if you get to the meat of it, it's really good. We talked just about what the prophetic nature of transition is and what it's like to see that and the spiritual dynamic of it. And like I said, well worth a listen. Or if you're in another country and English is your second language, welcome to you, because you're probably using YouTube to watch the translation. The captions can be auto-translated for your benefit. And that's really helping some of you. And in fact, the episode was so bad, one of my friends in Jakarta sent me a WhatsApp message going, hello, the sound on your podcast is very, very bad. And it was an encouraging message, but it was certainly not what I'd hoped for. Okay, well, apology over. And into episode 103, I'm pretty excited about this, because it's not often I get to speak to those people who feel like they're in the shadows. What do I mean by that? Well, you're going to find out in this episode. But first, let me just check the quality of the audio, and then I'll come right back. Okay, look, we interrupted the broadcast just for a technical checkpoint, and I'm pleased to say so far things are going well. So don't touch what ain't broken, and I'll just stick to drinking coffee and let the technical people do their stuff. Hey, I want to start by saying to you, transition is a journey. And for some of you, that will mean coming from the shadows and out of the shadows. And I'll give you some examples of what that means. But with regards to a journey, there's some wonderful quotes out there that you might be familiar with. The great philosopher Lao Tzu said, "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step." Rainier Rilke, she says, "The only journey is the one within." Well, that's pretty deep, isn't it? And so, you know, some people would say it's not about the destination, it's about the journey along the way. It's also true, but there's just so much more that we could say about a journey. Life is a journey that must be traveled, no matter how bad the roads and accommodations. So transformation is a process. So understand that transition is a journey. So I would say to you, I'm kind of trying to incorporate a prophetic element to the podcast. And I would say to you, it's time for the light of God to reveal the sons of God. And I'm going to use Daniel and his friends as an example of that. We know that Daniel was a young man of nobility, meaning, he was one of the wealthy, elevated families in the city of Jerusalem. And when King Nebuchadnezzar come down from Babylon and he lay siege against the city of Jerusalem and took captive the city. And what he did, Nebuchadnezzar, which was the plan in those days, is he would take the nobility, the ones with intelligence, the ones with learning, the ones that had, attributes that he wanted to further endorse and emulate. He would take them captive back to Babylon. And what they also did was they planted people in the region to try and plant their own culture, the Babylonian culture in that place. So that was going on. But anyway, Daniel and his friends, they got led in captivity back to Babylon, and they were the young men. And they were, by the favor of God, they were selected out of the shadows. They were selected out of the shadows, and they were selected for a training program that King Nebuchadnezzar had, because he wanted to elevate some of the Jewish people into his court, but he wanted to make sure that they were trained in the ways of the Babylonians. And so very much these Jewish boys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, with their friend Daniel, they were in the shadows of captivity, and God brought them out into the light. So the light of God revealed the sons of God. And more than that, amongst the young men, you can read the story in Daniel chapter 1 if you're interested. But the light of God reveals these young men, and they it's the famous Daniel fast, I suppose, that they instituted because they were privileged enough to have access to all the fine food of the kingdom and the wine of the king's palace. And Daniel and his friends said, "No, would you allow us to eat only vegetables and drink water, not alcohol, no fine wine, and test us in this and see if we do not become the favored ones?" And of course, You know the story, if you've read Daniel chapter 1, is God was involved, he honored them, and he elevated them above the others. And so the favor of God came upon them, and they came out of the shadows. Daniel himself, because of the gifting that God had put on him, he was elevated into an advisory position at the king's table. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, we know they survived the lion's den. That wasn't such an easy process, but it was one that led to promotion for them also. It's time, I'm prophesying over you, it's time for the light of God to reveal the sons of God. So let's talk about transition from the shadows. I want to start by speaking to you about what does it feel like when you're in the shadows. I've had many seasons in my life that I felt like I was in the shadows. I'm someone that likes the limelight. But I've learned through experience to appreciate the deep work of God in the darkness of the shadows. When I was young and immature and headstrong, I would be childish in my reaction when I was overlooked. When I was at primary school, I'd throw a tantrum if I wasn't picked for the top team with the top players at the school soccer field. When I was in the workplace, I missed out on a promotion that I arrogantly assumed was mine. I've told you this story before. And I had a bit of a tantrum about the process and the outcome. And then I had to turn around and God was teaching me something, because I had to turn around and work for the woman that was promoted ahead of me into the position that I wanted, that I thought I deserved. God taught me humility, he taught me patience, and he taught me the power of submission and serving. But when you're in the shadows, it feels like the whole world has forgotten about you. I remember, one time I was waiting for God's provision. He had promised, surely the Lord had promised that he was going to bring his provision and favor upon our family. And I remember pouring out my heart to God, and God said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." And I said, "Okay, well, I'm going to trust you at your word. Your word will not fall on the ground and become void or dead. But Lord, what should I do while I'm waiting?" And he literally said to me, "Well, you do the gardens and I'll go and do the provision." And I'm like, oh my gosh, it doesn't sound like a practical solution. But the point was, I was obedient to do the gardening and catch up with the maintenance around our lifestyle property. And the Lord surely brought about our provision to all glory to him, because what he did, there's no way I could have done. But in the shadows, it doesn't feel good. You feel overlooked. You feel like you've been hidden away. You feel like you're disregarded or devalued. You don't feel like you're given, especially if you're into comparing yourself with other people, you certainly don't feel like you're getting the favor of others. And I'm always reminded of David and the stinky cave at Adullam. And if you remember, David, I'll talk about David a couple of times actually, but David was favored by God. He was recognized as a man who had a heart after God, God's very words to the prophet. And so he was anointed as the king, but he wasn't appointed as the king straight away. So you're going to be anointed and not appointed. That's a word for some of you right there. And so he goes into hiding because his life's in danger. There's a whole bunch of stuff that go on. But anyway, he's hiding in the caves and the Rocky Mountains. He's hiding from the king Saul, because Saul is trying to kill him, and he's hiding in the back of this cave, because these guys were like mountain goats. They would hide in the rocks in the mountains, and they would move out to attack people if necessary. But one day, the story goes, in 1 Samuel 22, you can read about it. It's one of those potty stories that some people like, because Saul the king had to relieve himself, so he goes into the cave and makes a number 2. And it's, have you ever sat there next to someone doing a number 2? It's bad enough in airports, when I travel long distance and you spend a few days using public toilets. Like a side-by-side toilet is not really for me, I don't think. I'm sure of it, actually. But, if you've ever sat next to someone that's making a 2, you're like, oh, get me out of here. Well, David's hiding in the cave, and the king is right in front of him. and he's vulnerable because he's otherwise disposed. And his men say, you should kill him. Now's the opportunity. God has delivered him into your hands. And he says, no, I will not lay a hand on the man that God has chosen. The Lord will choose the timing. So David is not only hiding in a cave, anointed but not appointed, but then he's in a stinky cave. He's got to sit there and watch his enemy who's trying to kill him take a number 2. And though the man is vulnerable, he's not allowed to kill him. That's sometimes what it feels like to be in the shadows. You feel like people are taking excuse the language, they're taking a dump in front of you and you can't do anything about it. So the stinky cave is sometimes what it feels like. What about Joseph? It's another really well-known Bible story. Joseph gets falsely accused of having inappropriate intentions with his boss's wife. She accuses him, and so the boss throws him in prison in Egypt. He's a Hebrew. He's not even a native Egyptian, and he gets thrown into the prison in Egypt. But God's favor is on him. This is what we need to understand. God's favor is on him. And so we read this in Genesis chapter 39. Joseph is put in prison. He took Joseph and threw him in there, and he remained. But the Lord was with Joseph in the prison and showed him his faithful love. So look, understand, even in the shadows, God will be with you. You are not alone. You are not abandoned. God might be using this for his purposes. It's most likely, and I'll share that in a minute. But God was with Joseph in the prison and showed him his faithful love. It wasn't just, he's got no Bible. He's got no app. We can get the meme of the day. So God is demonstrating his faithful love through intimacy because that's all he can do. And the Lord made Joseph a favorite with the prison warden. Before long, the warden put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners and over everything that happened, and the warden had no worries. Because Joseph took care of everything, the Lord was with him and caused everything he did to succeed. Come on, just understand this in this first part. If you're in the shadows, it might feel like you're abandoned. It might feel like even if you're wrongly accused and you're punished and you're being punished for something you didn't do and you're in prison and you're restricted and you've got no freedom, the Lord can still use that season to put his favor upon you, to show you his faithful love, and he will grow you into the person you need to be for the next season of your life. So Joseph was in a prison in Egypt, and he was forgotten because I want to tell you the story. Joseph interprets the dreams of the cupbearer and the baker, and they're like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. You've really helped us. We will remember you. We will remember you. And they didn't. 2 years pass, and Joseph is still in prison going, those flipping guys, they never come back to me to rescue me. They know what, that God has favor on me and that I have these gifts. And can you imagine the conversation that's going on in his head at night while he's wrestling with this? Because he's forgotten. He's in the shadows of the prison, and he's forgotten. But I want to take you to Genesis 41. And the baker got killed, but the cupbearer did not. And the cupbearer finally speaks up to Pharaoh because Pharaoh's had these disturbing dreams. And none of his magicians can even tell him what the dream is and what it means. And so the king's cupbearer, who's the dude that pours the wine, tastes the wine, makes sure it's not poisoned, and then serves it to the king, to the Pharaoh. He says to Pharaoh, I've been reminded of my failure. Some time ago, you were angry with us and you imprisoned us, but we had a dream, and each dream had a meaning. And there was a young Hebrew man who's a slave of the captain of the guard. We told him our dream, and he told us what they meant. And everything happened just as he predicted. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph. And I always say, Joseph went from prisoner to prime minister in one day. All they had to do was shave his chin and put some clothes on him. Anything can happen. God can do anything to lift you out of the shadows. I remember while I was doing those gardens, I was at home, I was really struggling. No sense of purpose, no sense of strength because I couldn't provide for my family, even though the Lord had told me I will provide and pay the bills. And he did, faithfully. Every month we paid our bills. And every month the Lord says, well, while you're waiting, I want you to do your gardens. I want you to tidy things up. I want you to rest because something's coming. Sure enough, out of the blue, I get this phone call from this guy in another city. He says, hey, I've got this problem. I need someone with your skills. You're the only one that I know of that can help me at the level I need. Can I come and see you tomorrow? I'm like, yeah, man, if you want to drive down, there's a cafe up the road. We'll meet for coffee. Come and have coffee with Phil. And so he came the next day and we had lunch together, several coffees, and he said, I want to proposition you. Can you come and help me? So within 24 hours, I'd moved from the shadows of the season that God had me in, waiting, into the next season that he had prepared for me. So you might feel forgotten, but God has not forgotten. I can promise you, a beautiful verse that I was reading in 1 Samuel with regards to Samuel, and the words transcribed there are, the Lord's word will not fall to the ground. Man, I was meditating on that the other morning. The Lord's word will not fall to the ground. So your current reality may not match the prophetic promise, the word of God over your life. But I'm saying to you, come on, agree with the scriptures that the word of God will not fall to the ground. Say it out loud with me. Come on. The word of God will not fall to the ground. What that means is it will not cast away. It will not be dead. It will bring fruit because the Lord is faithful. Come on, the Lord is faithful. Come on, the Lord is faithful. Man, I'm getting some faith here, guys. This is pretty exciting. So what does it feel like when there's shadows? You can feel like you're hiding. You feel like forgotten. You feel like someone's taking a dump in front of you. You can be just rejected by those people around you. You could feel like God has locked you away for a reason. And so now I want to transition, and I want to suggest to you some ideas. Why does God use the shadows? Why does God use the shadows? Well, that's a very good question. I'm glad you asked. Look, quite simply, let's just keep it to three things. Three simple things that I think God has been doing in my life in a season of the shadows. Number one, it has to be number one, patience. What do most of us need? Patience. How does God use it? Delay, shadows, obscurity. We've just got to trust him. In the same way that I've just used Joseph and David as examples, they're both brilliant examples of young men who had significant promise over their lives. Remember Joseph in his technicolored dream coat. It was a gift from his father that prophesied his destiny and his dreams that he had, that he interpreted as having his father and his brothers bow down and to have leaders of nations bow down before him. And yet he had to wait like 13 years or something before the dreams kind of came to fulfillment. Patience. And so I alluded to this in my last story when I was waiting at home doing my gardening. The most powerful question that God has taught me in these seasons is, okay, God, what would you like me to do while I'm waiting? And if he says do nothing, go and prune the roses, then go and do that. If he says serve while you're waiting for promotion, then serve. If he says give and it will be given unto you, then do that. Sometimes you can give your way through generosity into prosperity. Whatever it is, patience. The Lord is teaching you patience. Trust in God. That's the biggest lesson that comes out of the shadows is patience so that you trust in God. I want to say the second thing is the Lord's timing. You know, God's timing is quite often not in check with my timing. It's almost like as if God did not check in with me to get instructions on what I knew the timing should be. In fact, it's almost like he absolutely knew what I was thinking, and so he did something different. Not because he's angry, not because he's nasty, not because he's mean, not because he's trying to punish me. He's trying to stretch me to trust him. And I just love the Lord's timing. So I was reading, as I was saying, 1 Samuel, and I love the story of Samuel, but in the midst of it, is the story of Eli's sons. And those two guys are worth a mention because they're horrible. And I won't tell you what they're doing, but I'm just sort of getting the reference. It's 1 Samuel chapter 2. So I can give you their names. Some of you might remember them. They were scoundrels, it said. Scoundrels who had no respect for the Lord. Hophni and Phinehas, the sons of Eli. And they were horrible men. And anyway, I just love this phrase in here around God's timing, because we've got Samuel, this young boy, and he's being raised up, and it's beautiful. But in 1 Samuel 2, verse 24 and 25, there's a real problem going on here, and Eli confronts them. And he says, I've been hearing reports from all the people about the wicked things you're doing. Why do you keep sinning? You must stop, my sons. The reports I hear are not good. If someone sins against the Lord, who can intercede for them? And it says, but Eli's sons, Hophni and Phinehas, would not listen to their father, for the Lord was already planning to put them to death. And there's a prophecy that you can read in 1 Samuel chapter 3. The point I'm making is that Samuel was the young boy being prepared, and he had to wait because God had already planned the demise of the legacy of Eli through his sons, and even the death of Eli himself. But listen to this. 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 26. Meanwhile, the boy Samuel grew taller and grew in favor with the Lord and with the people. So I want to encourage you. God will use the shadows for his purposes. God will use the shadows to prepare you for the promotion that's coming. He's going to teach you patience. He's going to teach you to understand the power of his timing. So the first one was patience. The second one was timing. The third one, this is the big kahuna, this one here, character. God is teaching you by building character in you in the shadows. What he teaches you outside of the limelight is what you will need for the humility that the promotion of the limelight will bring you. And I have to mention, I've talked about this guy a lot lately in all kinds of circles. I preached about it recently, but Saul, King Saul, what an egg. You know, he was chosen as the first king of Israel, but he demonstrated that he didn't have the character. And he wasn't prepared to develop the character. So character is the number one criteria, in my opinion. If God's ever going to move you out of the shadows, he's going to demand your character be of sufficient level of maturity so that you can carry the weight of the mantle that he's going to give to you. Character. So patience, submission to God's timing, and character. And quite frankly, in the church of the West in these days, I can't speak for the East because I don't know, but all over the place, we're seeing church leaders stood down because what's happening in the lack of character in the dark side, in their dark side, what's happening is it's being revealed. The Lord's saying, I will no longer allow this to be concealed. I will reveal those things that show the lack of integrity in the man or the woman, and I will have it revealed because I cannot have my church walking in impurity. So don't demand promotion out of the shadows prematurely, because you're going to be put in a position that you don't have the character to maintain. And I've learned that the hard way. So trust God when he's saying, I'm building something in you, and it's called character. And so God will use the shadows. So don't despise the shadows. Embrace God's timing, but embrace God's purpose. And ask him, what do you want me to do while I'm waiting? And then which part of my character would you like me to surrender to you today? I mean, you could pray that every day, and it would be a good prayer, right? Okay, so we've talked about why the shadows, and I want to just highlight one key element. If there's one piece of advice that I would give anybody, I have shared this thought in so many different ways over the course of my life and investing into people, and that is this: my real key thought that I want you to take away from this podcast is serve your way out of the shadows. There is one pathway in my mind and my experience, because of my experience, there's one pathway that will help you build the character that is necessary, and that is to serve your way out of the shadows. I spoke to you about Saul before, and obviously I've mentioned David several times, but King Saul, it says in 1 Samuel 16 that the Lord had already determined to remove him. And so the Lord sent a distressing spirit upon Saul. It's a kind of a sort of a destructive kind of internal mental space, emotional space. We don't actually know, but it's a foreboding spirit. It's a distressing spirit. The Bible says the Lord sent a distressing spirit to trouble Saul. So I'm thinking it's kind of like madness and depression. If you read some of the things he did, he'd kind of lost it a little bit. But the point is, what happens is his men say to him, look, we know music's the key to help you find peace, so why don't we find a minstrel that can help? And he goes, well, great, who do you know? And they're like, hey, there's this guy, this young boy, the youngest of Jesse, the shepherd. Why don't we get him in? Because he can come in from Bethlehem and he can serve you. And so it says they called in David, and as he played his harp and his lyre, as he minstreled away, the peace came upon Saul. Now we already know, Saul doesn't know this, but we know because we read earlier in 1 Samuel chapter 16 that Samuel the prophet had already anointed David to be the future king. He had anointed him, but he was not yet appointed. The point is, David is called to serve the very man that he was to replace. Sometimes the best thing you can do is to humble yourself and to serve the one that you will succeed, or to serve the one that you don't trust, or to serve the one that is not necessarily respecting you. Sometimes the best thing you can do is serve your way out of the shadows, because God is going to use that season for you for him to create something in you around the humility and the love and the compassion and the mercy that is going to be necessary for you to have in the promotion that's coming. So number one advice, if all you get is this, and you're not going to like it, but take it like some decent medicine, swallow it whole, but serve your way out of the shadows. Best advice I can give you, and today it's free. Look at that, you're welcome, no problems. What I want to do is, as I'm working towards an end here, I had this question in my mind that I felt, look, let's just get it out there, and it will be really important for some of you. What if your transition keeps you in the shadows? What if your transition keeps you in the shadows? So what do I mean by transition? A transition, as I've advertised, is you going from one place to another in line with the purposes of God. Now, in some cases, that's a promotion. So Joseph was promoted out of prison into the prime minister's office in one day. He was given favor of Egypt, Pharaoh himself, signet ring, all that stuff. And clearly, that's a promotion out of the shadow. It's a transition. David eventually was appointed the king, and there was a 7-year journey for that. You can read about that in 2 Samuel. But what if the transition God has for you, the transformation that leads to transition, actually keeps you in the shadows? And in fact, the whole point of what God is doing, taking to a place of significant impact, but you're not going to get the limelight. You're not going to get the stage or the platform. You're not going to get the prominence. You're not going to get the followers on social. You're not going to get the likes and the clicks, but you can still fulfill God's purpose. And I want to tell you a story, because I sat here, I'm thinking, what's the best way for me to describe this to you? And I wrote this question down on my notes. Imagine being the scribe for the Declaration of Independence of the United States of America. So, let me give you a history lesson, and hopefully this helps. It's 1776. So, that's almost 250 years ago. 1776. And you might think that Thomas Jefferson was the one that was in charge here. but that's not the case. So actually, there's a guy called Richard Henry Lee, and he makes a recommendation. He makes the recommendation to the Congress of the United States. He makes a recommendation that there should be a writing and a signing of the Declaration of Independence. So Richard Henry Lee is actually the one who moved the motion, who made the first suggestion, as it were, in a formal capacity. So you might go, well, that's awesome. I didn't even know his name. I know Thomas Jefferson was integral in the execution. I know he was the Prime Minister, the President of the United States. I mean, that's awesome. Let's lock it in. That's great. No, Richard Henry Lee came up with the idea. And Thomas Jefferson was allocated the responsibility for the execution, or the preparation and execution. So that's awesome as well, because we've got to have the signing of the Declaration of Independence, which is a key document in the history of the United States. But he didn't write it. He didn't scribe it. There is a man who had beautiful handwriting. Now, you've got to understand, in the 18th century, 1776, not very many people went to school, which means not many people learned to write. Certainly didn't have access to the equipment that was necessary to learn what was called penmanship. And so there was a man who was identified, and he was part of, no computers, no tapping it out on your phone. But in the 18th century, this man called Timothy Matlack. Timothy. Now, I've got a photo of him on the screen here. He's wearing tights and some lovely outfit with knickerbocker, and stuff. But in 1790, he was well regarded in America. But in 1776, no one knew who he was. And so he writes out the Declaration of Independence, which was about patriotism and defiance in the face of the British rule. So this is key for the United States of America. It's a key document. And you never knew that God's purpose that he designed for this man, Timothy Matlack, was to be the penman, the writer, beautifully inscribing on the parchment with ink the Declaration of Independence of the United States of America. Timothy Matlack. And so what's my point? Sometimes God's transition into your purpose or assignment that he's got for you is to take you from the shadows into a place of purpose, but not into prominence. And you've probably never heard this guy's name before. And yet he's the guy that wrote out the Declaration of Independence. Let me give you something else, a little piece of history. You've heard about signing something, and there's a colloquial phrase that says, you need to put your John Hancock on that. And it's colloquial for saying you need to put your signature, you write your name on it. Well, did you actually know that John Hancock was the president of the Congress, and he was the first to sign this unanimous Declaration of the Independence of the United States of America? But because he probably had a big head, because he was the president and he thought he needed prominence, he signed the document in this large, prominent signature of his name right in the center underneath the Declaration. He had this beautiful signature, but he wrote it out. And everyone else has done smaller signatures, but his is prominent. You can read it. And apparently there's rumors to have a bounty on his head because he thought he would be the prominent person in the signing. Whereas Timothy Matlack, you can't read his name on it because he's the artist behind the creation. So I wanted to share that with you so that you realize that sometimes the transition that God has for you might actually keep you in the shadows, and that's okay. So I think, we've got to think about, what does it feel like we're in the shadows? What is God doing while we're in the shadows? How can we serve our way out of the shadows? And what if God says our transition is going to keep us in the shadows? And that's a toughie. So if I think about Timothy Matlack. So I want you to take some time as part of this process of transition is to think, what is the journey on? Where am I moving from and where am I moving to? And the best way that you can do that is to understand what is the thing that God has said to me and what am I going to focus on? And I want you to think about that and then think about the journey of transition. I'm enjoying this journey, that's for sure. And you can check in next time for episode 104. But in the meantime, enjoy your week, enjoy your coffee, and travel well. And I look forward to being back with you real soon. Until then, take care.